Hello everybody. Happy spring. It is Saturday. We're having some really nice weather here, and I'm going to make a video that I've been thinking about for probably 3 months, but I feel like I really understand it more. I am who I am because of narcissism. I have no doubt. I am a shamanic practitioner. I am a shamanic witch. And my initiation was due to narcissism. That was the crisis that I went through, a crisis of identity, which I'll be talking about in a few minutes. This video might go a little bit long, so you can watch it in 2 parts, or you can go make yourself comfortable, lay down in bed. This is very important information for me to share in the way that I share it. I am not an MSW. I am not a psychologist, and I'm not an expert in helping people in the recovery of narcissistic abuse or neglect. All right? I know that there are different types of narcissists, and that we are formed primarily in our childhood. Our childhood years are the formidable years, and this is generally where the narcissists are formed also. They have a trauma in childhood. That being said, I've also stated I do not make these videos to bash my ex or my dead mother. There are things that do happen. Fortunately, you know, it was not all really bad. It was not all abusive or physically abusive. All right? There was lots and lots of subtle things that were happening that were very confusing, that I think we're only just now beginning to understand. It's like reading between the lines. It is a cult, which is hidden. Things that aren't said, but behaviors that are done that are creating these things that happen as a result of the behaviors. A person's behaviors do really tell what is going on inside of their mind. So moving forward, I'm going to be a lot wiser in dealing with people that may have narcissistic traits. I myself feel it's going to be important just to be direct and tell someone, look, you know, I see very strong narcissistic traits in you. I believe I'm qualified to say so because that's what I've lived with my entire life. And I've had my own crisis, and I've come out of it, but I am one of the lucky ones. Many people who go through what I went through kill themselves, and I've said that. It can be avoided. The good news is you can heal, but there's a lot of techniques that are not talked about in mainstream. They're not even given credence as to being valid or truly helpful. But as I've said, I actually saw my mother changing before my very eyes by her working directly with her subconscious mind. All right, so this particular event I think is very important for me remembering how I began to have a lot of burdens placed upon me. All right? This has to do with crossing boundaries, inappropriate information to a child who is at an inappropriate age to hear the information that is being forced upon them. Emotional dumping, crossing boundaries. You're not having a voice. You're not having a choice. You're a child. What are you supposed to do? All right. So this particular story today that ended up causing quite a lot of symptoms to start occurring in my life at the age of 12 was I had been put to bed for the evening. And it was usually my mother who would stand in the hallway and she would say the Lord's Prayer, even though she didn't like religion. And we would say goodnight and she would close our door as far as we wanted to close it. On this particular night, my mother came back, I don't know how many minutes later, 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes later, and opened my bedroom door, brought in a chair, sat beside my bed, in between my torso and my legs, which you know was in the middle of my body at hip level, so I couldn't really just turn and get out of bed. And I'm like, what's up? I just look at her like, what's going on? You know, you've already said good night. She said, well, I wanted to come in tonight and start telling you that I've decided you're old enough to start hearing my problems, listening to my problems. And I'm like, what? First of all, this was my sleep time. My sleep time now is being interrupted, which she did to me again years later when she decided to invade my tiny little room that I was renting behind a house and announced that she was living with me, that she needed to save money, and would keep poking me to wake me up when I told her, you've been here for a month, you need to leave. She was mad. So now my sleep is being invaded. I said, Mom, I need to go to sleep. You know I'm not a morning person. I have to get up and go to school in the morning. Now, it might not have been a weekday. It could have been a Friday night. But there were several other occasions that I'm going to talk about that she did come in like 2 days later. Every 2 days she would come in. So it had to be, there had to be one of those nights was a weeknight. And she said, I know, it's not going to take long. And I said, what do you mean I'm old enough to hear your problem? Well, you're mature, you know, you're 12 now, you're going to be turning into a teenager. And there's a few things that I think that you should know. And I think you're old enough for me to start telling you my problems. So, excuse me. You know, I'm perplexed and I'm really not happy about it. I was already fully aware of my mom's chronic complaining. She was a perennial victim. She was also an alcoholic. She loved to complain and nitpick. It was difficult to go out with her just about anywhere, especially out to eat. So, I mean, if you're understanding what I'm talking about, then, you know, feel free to comment below. But, you know, I'm like, what are you talking about? She says, well, I don't really want to talk bad about your father, but he's just not a husband that can be more like what we need for the house and for the family. I'm like, what? This is like way over my head. And she says, he's a good man, but, okay, my mom was a covert narcissist. He just doesn't do enough, right? He doesn't help me out enough, and this, I said, but he, you know, he cooks. I mean, I was actually pretty precocious, and I was starting to feel trapped and uncomfortable, and yes, I know, but he doesn't do this. So she was pointing out everything she could that he doesn't do and magnifying it and serving it on a platter to me. And I was very, very uncomfortable. I said, Mom, I don't want to hear this. Oh, I'm not trying to make you uncomfortable. I'm not trying to bash your father, but I think you need to know so that when you get older, you don't end up getting with a man who doesn't provide. I'm like, what are you talking about? I have no idea. This is way over a child's head. This is not something a 12-year-old needs to be trying to process. I'm a child. I'm a dependent child. And I need to know that I'm loved and protected and cared for. Not having someone come in and make a declaration that I'm old enough to start hearing her problems and making the announcement that I'm mature and that's why she's doing this. I think part of it was she knew I was entering puberty, becoming a teenager, and I wasn't going to be the child, the young child anymore. And this was her way of, I guess, locking it down. What happens is they're not only crossing your boundaries, invading your privacy, but they're turning you into an emotional caregiver. And they're emotionally dumping on you. And so she was emotionally dumping on me, turning me into an emotional caregiver and a people pleaser. Basically, what am I going to do? I still have another 6 years before I'm 18. Is this how it's going to be from now on? I don't remember exactly what else she said, but I said, I don't understand that, Mom. You know, I don't think you should be talking to me about this. So it happened again a few nights later. I don't know how long she sat next to me, but she got up and she left and she came back a few nights later. And I'm, of course I'm wincing like, oh God, not this again. Oh, I don't want to make you uncomfortable, but I really want you to know, don't grow up and marry, someone. I said, Mom, that's my dad. I do not like you talking bad to me about Dad. That's my dad, and he is a good man. He's your husband, but he's my dad. So I was speaking up for him, and I was speaking up to her. I did not like feeling trapped. She kept repeating the same things. I think at that point I said to her, don't you have a counselor? She was in counseling. She was in therapy for 20 years. She did learn a few things, but she liked to talk about her, she was a perennial victim. Anyone and everyone who would listen, she would talk about how she was so malnourished as a child, left alone in a crib for 2 days, no food. When they found her, she was in her feces and her eyes were cross-eyed. That could have actually been the moment that she became a narcissist. But I said to her, don't you have a counselor? Come on. This is the type of thing that is totally, totally inappropriate and is forcing the child to listen to information they cannot process. It's like poisoning someone's mind against the other parent, maybe even turning them against the parent, trying to turn them into maybe some type of a spy. I know that in cases of divorce, this might be happening when they're trying to maybe turn the child into a flying monkey and have, the children against the other parent. It happens a lot. And she would complain when I would wince or I would sigh like, You know, when someone sighs, that means you're draining their energy. This is vampiric, guys. It is feeding off of someone for their own sick pleasure, robbing you of your sleep time, which you need to go to bed. You're a child. I mean, the whole thing is a terrible mess. Now, the irony or the synchronicity to it, the mirror image of it is, oddly enough, what happened to her when she was 9 years old. And that is that her stepfather entered her bedroom after she'd been put to bed, approached her for raping her, really, and she objected. But her voice wasn't heard, and he did it anyway. Isn't it interesting how this is being mirrored in what she decided to do to me at night when I was 12? Enter my bedroom after I'd been put to bed, breaking my privacy, breaking my boundaries, turning me into an emotional caregiver despite my objections, ignoring my objections, ignoring my voice, interrupting my sleep, and telling me things like, he's a good man, but. Now, I told her if this doesn't stop, I'm going to have to tell Dad. That was not something she expected. I said, you need to be talking to Dad about this, not me. She came a third time and said, I don't want you to misunderstand what I'm trying to say, so forth and so on. And then again, I think this is just a mirror event that's occurring the same way she was violated over and over again by her stepfather, which could have been when her narcissistic event was formed. So, you know, once again, I was wincing and I was just hearing the same thing again like a broken record, reinforcing what she'd said before. He's not a provider. Okay, fine. So she left, and I went to my dad the next day, and I said, Dad, I need to talk to you. What is it? Mom's been coming to my bedroom, talking bad about me at night. What? Yeah, after I go to bed, she comes in with a chair, she sits next to my bed and starts telling me her problems about you, you know. She says, you're a good man, but you don't do this, you don't do that. You don't really pay all the bills. You know, you have to go to your mom, who was wealthy, thank goodness. I said, what? What? When did this start? How long's this been going on? I said, well, she's come in 3 times now, and I told her, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. If you do this again, I'm going to tell Dad. You go talk to Dad. You got a problem with Dad. You go talk to Dad. He said, all right, I'll handle it. Now, this was a very kind, passive, gentle man. He was not really a provider. He was a consummate musician, and he loved to do that, but he didn't make a lot of money at it. He could write the music for the other instruments that played with him in a trio or a quartet, but he didn't have big contracts on a regular basis that paid a lot of money. So he said to her one day, and I heard it, what are you doing going to Sabrina's bedroom, talking to her about things like that? Talking to her about me, what you're disappointed in me about. You don't do that. I think at some point there was some attempt to come to me and not really apologize, but scold me in a way that, again, was trying to make me feel guilty for betraying her. I was just trying to enlighten you, right? Bullshit. Not all men, there's different types of men. Not all men are providers, okay? At some point he did go out and get a very big contract with a huge nightclub for a year, but he didn't like that. It was sucking the joy out of his love of music. So he really didn't do that on a grand scale ever again. Hardly ever. Maybe once or twice. He had a wealthy mom. My grandmother was very generous. She loved helping. She didn't mind helping, financially supporting. We had lived in a house she bought. She had a real estate portfolio. She got wealthy by purchasing real estate. She was amazing. And so she didn't mind helping out. Whatever it was that we needed, we'd help out. Now, my mom had decided to move out of that house and go and apply for a house with her and my dad together. They could only qualify for low-income housing. They were a little bit over, so she did some finagling and they got in. And those days, they were big houses. We had a big house on a corner lot with 4 bedrooms, and we were never wanting for anything. 2 cars in the driveway, dance lessons, piano lessons, all that stuff. Grandma helped, Grandma paid out. There was never any issue. That wasn't enough for her. It wasn't enough that she had a counselor to talk to and other people to go, anyone who would listen to her sob story. This is what happens. I had to live the rest of my teenage years knowing that my mom was deeply resentful of my dad, disappointed, right? He wasn't good enough, he wasn't enough. One of the deadly unspoken things that can be said when you are insulting, belittling, degrading a person is that you're not good enough. You're not enough. And my life partner would say to me, why can't you do something good? This is what was happening to him when he was a child. So anyway, I was being turned into a people pleaser and conditioned to become the emotional caregiver. Later on in life, in my early 20s, I still had my mom bombarding me for my attention. I didn't know how to deal with it. It was just so suffocating. You feel obligated. I had a friend one time say, when my mom came to where I was living, and I was in the laundry room, talking the way she does, and then asking me for money. And my friend said, God, Sabrina, your mom comes to your work. Now she's coming here to the laundry room. It's like you're the mom and she's the child. That was what she planned. That was what she was doing when I was 12. Announcing that my childhood was over. And it was time for me to now be listening to her. This causes a confusion about identity. And it's a slow process that continues over time. So as I go on to live my life as a young adult, she is demanding of my time. She is constantly calling me, inviting me out. I become a captive audience again. And once again, you just feel obligated. You are trained to be the people pleaser. You just don't know how to get away from it because you don't have the information. You're not equipped, Until you're 25, your frontal lobe isn't even fully formed yet. It's almost like you don't tell me no. You listen. You don't criticize me. You don't call me out. You don't highlight my inappropriate actions. So then eventually me and other people, we go on and we get married, and we're hoping that this kind of buffers it. But in my case, it didn't. I still had her calling. And then the chances of you actually getting a partner who is a narcissist are very high. And that is what happened to me. Eventually you do reach the bottom of it because now I had 2 people that were actually not allowing me to be me. I had to people please. I had to be supportive and emotional caregiver to the one who would get upset with himself over little things and try to understand what was going on. And eventually you come to the bottom of it. And that will be my next video, which I think I've come to understand that there are black holes that can happen to alcoholics who probably are raised by either an alcoholic or a narcissist. But you do not have to be an alcoholic. It is a crisis of identity. And one psychologist here on YouTube has described as being an insect sucking larvae out of a pupae, I think, and then leaving an empty shell. And I called my mom one day and I said, I'm just walking around like a dead person. I feel like someone has died and I think it's me. That was actually a good sign. I was fortunate in that I had been given the tools and the equipment to apply to my life by my father, who loved mysticism and esoteric things. And he took me at the age of 12 to learn meditation, about the same time that I think my mom was doing this to me. And from there, as I got older, he said, okay, now it's time for you to go to Silva Mind Control. And I became fascinated by the world of the subconscious mind and speaking to yourself and changing thought habits and visualizing what you want, all of that. So as I began to apply it in my life, as I'm feeling like a walking dead person, she told me I needed grief counseling, but I chose to work directly with my subconscious mind because I had experienced some breakthroughs when I was younger. But I had to return to it, and I had to do it every single day. And as I applied different techniques, every other day, and announced to my partner, you take the kids, I got to do this for me. Anytime I'd have a dream or an insightful thought or a feeling of what I really needed to do, I enlisted the aid of a counselor. I found a counselor who was non-judgmental. She didn't know about narcissism. But I would tell her what I was seeing, what I was feeling, what I was remembering. And she would ask me what I wanted. No one had ever given me permission to ask what I wanted. As I was becoming a young wife and a young mother, my mom would call simply just to talk about herself. It's all about them. That's all it's ever about. And until my sister called and said, you got to go to Al-Anon. We're ACAs. That's why mom is driving us nuts. You've got to set up boundaries, and you've got to create, I said, well, how do I do that? She said, don't be available. Whoa. That's not going to go over very well. It didn't, and it doesn't. It goes over like a lead balloon. They don't want to hear that. They want to bombard your personal space. They're accustomed to you being the emotional caregiver. And when you do try to set it up, maybe they agree. The only way they could comply is what's called the foot in the door technique. This is when they pretend to care about you. When they call and they ask about you, and you can tell the tone of voice is different. It's insincere. How are you? Are you busy? Can you talk? All right. How's everything going? All right. Work. How's this? How's that? And I try not to harp on it because, you can nitpick a lot of things. If there was an issue, I mention it. And she was very good at deflecting and telling me what I really needed to do to take care of myself. But that doesn't apply to her. Then she would go on and talk about herself. So that only worked maybe 2 or 3 phone calls. It didn't sound sincere, and then it would be all about her. You finally get to the place where you have to cut them off. And I did it twice. I did it one time for a few months and then a second time for an entire year. So that's all I have to say for today. This has been kind of emotional and hard for me, but I have to share it because I wouldn't be here today who I am if I didn't work through my subconscious mind while I was caught up in the partnership with the narcissist as an adult, and then work my way through that, getting a formal education, and then getting an account, getting in a phone, and then finally moving out. I did gain some strength and some peace, could keep my peace of mind, you know, make myself unavailable, say no like it's a full sentence. I only need to say it once, but I'll say it again. And not get hysterical or upset like my codependent mother would get. That was all removed as I really stepped into a more confident, knowing person that it wasn't me, it was them. But you have to heal. So when you get away from it, then you'll feel more energy and you will start to heal. Things do come back in waves, and you'll be saying to yourself, oh, you'll be talking like you're talking to that person, what you wanted to say. You're still trying to work through it because you don't know what it was. So rest assured knowing that I'll be making another video to explain to you how you can work to heal through working with your subconscious mind, even working with the deity to help you with your hippocampus, all right? And until then, have a wonderful rest of the week. And if you're enjoying spring and spring break, have a wonderful weekend. See you later.